later stage. All right, so let's open up the file or a file that we were working on. I think it was even this file, the new client SMSF for the 30 June 15 year. I'll do that right now. I'll cover that right now. So when it comes to, well, this is one of the first things that I do before I actually start auditing, and that's dragging and dropping all my reference supporting documentation up into the client file and then referencing it as much as possible at this stage. So if we go to assume we've been given another document, it might be let's just make one up. So I've got another share. Let's bring one open. If I, let's say National Australia Bank, so I want to import this, let me go back to SD. So I'll open up, SD, and we'll store it at SD first, supporting documents folder. So we'll put in SD4. This is the NAB supporting document that we had, that I was just showing you before. Drag, drop, normal upload. That's going to give it SD4. It's going to give it the next, I suppose, alphanumeric reference there is, I mean, according to what's up there already. Let's say for some reason I wanted to call that SD6. To change this to something other than SD4, I click on that pencil and then just change the reference accordingly. If I want to change the narration of that reference, just click on that pencil again and just make the edits in this box here. When that might be more appropriate perhaps is if I'm not uploading my reference or supporting documentation to this folder, I might upload that supporting documentation to the lead schedules instead. So for instance, assets, if I'm in the F folder, and I wanted to upload that document here under F16. So that's the NAB document. I want to put it under shares in listed companies. Here's the NAB document. If I drag and drop it to sit below F5, it will give it the next narration. It'll be F4 or F2, or it'll be the next reference in these F folders. Let's see what it is, F27. So we must have, we've only got F2 in here. So it gave it the next number in the F section. I don't want it at F2. I want it sitting at F1.5.1. So to change that, just click on the pencil, F1.5.1, and save. Now sometimes when you actually drag and drop the document, it asks you to name that document at the point of drag and drop, and that's when you would simply repeat that step that I just showed you a second ago. Also, sometimes if I find that document has been if it was F27, it might appear here below F25. If I want to drag and drop that back up to here and reorder that in where it sits in this folder, I would just click on the file. I would just drag and drop. I don't even have to edit. I can click over that PDF icon until that 4-star or point arrow appears, hover over that, click, and just drag it to where I want that document to sit. Does that answer the referencing, the change in the referencing query? If not, just let me know as we get further or as we progress.
Yeah, I think it does. Rocky, can you just text me to say yes or no?
If he puts his thumb up, if I open up that screen, okay, I got it. We were missing the pencil edit function. All right, so if you can't see that pencil, that must be due to a technical issue. So I'm not sure, maybe refresh the page or log off, log back on, I'm not sure. If you still can't find that pencil, you've got a technical glitch. So it's something for the IT guys to look into. All right, so let's move on. So once at the end of last webinar, we got to the stage we're ready to commence the audit. We now, depending on how familiar you are with the application, I would suggest perhaps in the early days when you're familiarising yourself with it, the workflow diagram is probably a good starting point. So that menu towards the top of your page that I'm hovering over now, the workflow diagram, if I click on that, I'll be taken to this page, which is really just a step-by-step list of a step-by-step guide for completing the audits. If you complete the audits in this order, it's probably a good starting point. You'll notice this workflow diagram is divided into 4 tasks, key tasks, over towards the left of the page, being the preliminary engagement activities, all the way down to the audit review and finalisation. On each of these tasks, you'll see there's a reference to another work paper, or in most of the tasks, you have a reference to one of the work papers. So for instance, B1 to the preliminary engagement activities, etc. I can access those work papers from the workflow diagram by simply clicking on the link, and we're taken to the particular work paper. So what I'll show you for this webinar is how some tips and traps, or how to complete some of these work papers more efficiently, as well as how to edit some of the work papers to make the audits more efficient. And we start with, if we are on B1, this ability we have to, in some instances, instead of having to, first of all, you'll see we've got a number of procedures in most of the work papers. And each procedure requires us to perform a function or undertake a task and tick complete once we've done so. With some work papers, rather than having to go and read each procedure, once you find yourself becoming more familiar with each of these procedures and finding yourself having to spend a little less time reviewing them, you have the ability to, instead of ticking every single box, and there could be multiple or a large number of boxes here, we have the ability to tick once and apply that to all of those boxes. Now, to do so, and that's provided you've got the appropriate authority to do so when you as a staff member have been set up in the fund. Once I've got the authority, if I click up in the top left in the box prepared by, and then I hover over the date and click on the date, you'll see the calendar appears. If I click on today's date, you'll note that by clicking on today's date, each of these completed boxes have been marked complete, saving the need to do that on each of these, or for each of these procedures. You notice also there's a lot of commentary in these comment boxes, default or generic commentary, requiring you to select the most appropriate. You also have the ability to put your own comments in there if need be. This is probably one of the areas you might make the additions in your firm template module. Alternatively, on an audit by audit basis, you can make the changes then. I'll cover that when I get to the firm template module more so. Another thing that I don't know if it scares a lot of people out, it overwhelms a lot of people sometimes, is the amount of writing in some of these work papers. A lot of that writing is just for information purposes only. You'll sometimes see there's guidance included here for you. If I click on that arrow, that's it. It's just guidance. Once you or are familiar with this guidance, or once you're familiar with this content, you may find yourselves not having to review or read that in the same level of detail as when you first start auditing. When we come down this page, for instance, B1 still, a number of, I suppose, work papers have tasks for us to form and risks for us to identify. For instance, auditors, before they start or commence or continue with an existing engagement, are required to identify any threats to the ethical requirements. So we've got the fundamental principles here as well as independence, and they're found in APES 110. Audit Flow has created, firstly, a risk library, the libraries are, I suppose, a bit light on in this this work paper. The libraries that I'll show you as we go through in some of the other work papers are more detailed. But in this instance, for this instance, we've got example threats to integrity, objectivity, etc. Now, they're just as a guide. If you, I mean, I suppose when you're auditing your funds, if you find that this threat is applicable, just leave it. We've already got a default safeguard required to put in place. You have the ability to change and add new threats. Well, there's only that one threat in this library. If you have not identified any threats though, you've got this no threats identified option. If I click that, we've got no threats identified. I'd simply just remove this one up here. If I have not identified any threats, I'd suggest possibly noting that. Otherwise, you could be accused from the regulators or the QA reviewers of just glossing over this work paper or any other work papers without actually having considered the threats. FP, fundamental principle. So objectivity. See, this no threats identified. If none of these threats have been identified, I would remove them. I don't have in my library no threats identified option. I have the ability to add additional threats. If you do that, you'll need to add a safeguard there. I won't spend more time on that. Either read these, agree with these, or if you don't agree with them, just remove the threat. From memory, so excuse the question, but your firm was a complete external audit firm, was that correct? If you were to operate under the Chinese walls arrangements, that your firm prepared both the accounts and another principal was responsible for the audit, you'd probably change this to you know, a self-review threat to, oh sorry, one up here, objectivity, self-review threat and safeguard. But I'll cover that threat when we look at B2, the threats to independence. So there's just a couple of little hints over here on this page. If we move over to the independence checklist, B2, again, you'll see just more information. That's the objective. Nothing required from you there. You'll see here are the types of threats to independence: self-interest, self-review, advocacy, etc. And the default response within audit flow is not applicable. Obviously, if you do encounter or identify any threats to independence, you would need to change this. So for instance, the Chinese walls arrangement, you might choose something like that. Where are we? Up here. And then the safeguard from the list of safeguards within the library, such as that. But there's not a lot there. If you're an external audit firm, you may not find yourself taking too much time to complete this. You might have familiarity threat, for instance. You've been working on a particular engagement for many years, or have a long association with the trustee, etc. But there's just another sample of different threats contained within the library. But again, if no threats identified, tick not applicable and move on. The purpose, before I go any further, if you look over on the left of this column over on the left, you've got in the B section a number of B1 through to B8. Now they're risk identification procedures. B1 to all the way up to B7, 6, sorry, they're risk identification procedures along with B8. When you, and I suppose risk identification is not exclusively limited to those sections. You could identify risks when completing the audit program also. We're not limited to identifying risks in these work papers. Once we've identified any risk, work paper B7 is designed to allow us to assess that risk and then I suppose comment on what the further audit procedures we'll implement in response to that risk would be. I'll come to B7 at the end. So the engagement letter, I won't go too much into this. The engagement letter, it's not an actual procedure that requires you to, I suppose, undertake. It's simply a template engagement letter. Some people use this letter, some people have their own template. If you choose to use this engagement letter, information input into some of those other fields, the client fields, will populate into this template letter. The reason why they're blank is because I don't think we input that data into the fields. If you decide to use this engagement letter and you wish to edit the document, the same, not just this letter but any other letter, you would simply click on Edit Document tab, make any additions or edits you want to make here, close or save the changes, exit edit mode. Another option some people do is they make all and then print. Some people, if they choose these template letters, will make all the changes necessary, copy the document, copy and paste that onto a Word document and PDF document Word and save in that way. I won't go too much into that. One thing, even if it is just a letter that you don't wish to use or you wish to use it, either way, you need to click prepared by and completed by at some stage. Alternatively, when you're on the work paper index, you have the cheats option. What I mean by that is you have the option here to tick complete on any of these boxes, whether or not we to save yourself having to tick complete or prepared by on an individual basis. I won't do that now, but if I tick that, this whole folder will appear as complete. Come back to the planning section though. Another letter we have, trustee controls and fraud risk questionnaire. This is just a sample letter that you may or may not ask the trustees or the accountant to complete, designed to give the auditor an understanding of the internal controls and the fraud risk procedures the fund has in place. Now, if you've got your own way of obtaining this information, feel free to do that. This is just there to assist if need be. Another thing that a lot of auditors have asked over in the past, let me just go to the work paper index a second. See, a lot of auditors might have their own template engagement letter, or they might have their own trustee controls questionnaire. They might have their own analytical procedures, for instance. So what they've asked me in the past, can we replace this engagement letter with our own firm template engagement letter? And the answer is yes, absolutely you can. The only downside with replacing this engagement letter, or any of those other letters for that matter, with our own is, if I was to, for instance, let me just do this. Let's say this was a Word document, not a PDF document, and I attached that to my firm template module. So if I, engagement letter sample, if I replaced, sorry, 2 seconds. If I replaced this B3, audit flows B3, with my own version of B3, if every time I wished to create, see, this template engagement letter captures information within other fields in the software and populates them into this engagement letter. If I was to upload my own document, we don't have the ability to do so. So I would have to, on that template engagement letter, open it up in Word, make the amendments to the Word document, and then save and upload that engagement letter back up into the software. It doesn't give me the ability, or it's not a live document, if I upload my own version of any of these template documents. So it is an option, but it is not, I suppose, an online live document. If we move on to B4, audit strategies are one of the more important audit planning documents according to the accounting bodies. It's also one of the documents that, or parts of the audit plan, that is found to have been, I suppose, a bit more non-compliant in terms of auditing standards. It's also a very onerous document, or can be a very onerous document, requiring a lot of fields to be completed, and at the bottom half of this document a lot of boxes to be, or procedures to be, ticked. It also contains a lot of information. Firstly, when you I suppose upload a client file or copy a client file directly from the accounting software, these fields should largely be completed. Now, if that's not the case, There's a number of reasons, probably, or the most likely reason might be because Class, BGL, Supermate, whichever software you're using, have these fields within that software have not been completed. So just check that if these fields are left blank. Some of this information will be blank. Some of the fields here are either captured not from the accounting software, but from that client file that I showed you early in the last webinar. If you want to save time, especially for those that have their firm template module, if we go down the page to these procedures where we're asked to provide a response, in my firm template module, if we're comfortable that a lot of the responses to these procedures across different funds is primarily the same response, this is one area we may wish to consider creating a completed version of this work paper in our template module. So I'll show you later when we create our firm template module, we can go and tick these responses in the firm template and have them carried forward. You can also find, now this is probably not as good an option, but it is an option. You can copy this work paper from another file. Now that might save you time. For instance, if this was a brand new fund and you know that in another fund you recently completed that these procedures have been responded to, yes, no, etc. You could copy work paper B4, and I'll come back to this again later, but you could copy work paper B4 from that other file. It doesn't have to be this same SMSF. It would help if it's this same SMSF, but it doesn't have to be this same SMSF. The downside of that is, whilst these procedures, yes, no, yes, etc., those procedures might have the same response. The fields up here, because it's a different fund, will be different. The fund name will be different, etc. Address, etc. will be different. Now, one time that might work is if we change software. Now, I'll talk about it later, but when you create your firm template, depending on how much editing or modifications you make to that firm template, when you roll forward to the next year, if there's been any update to the software, so this is version 4, or this is based on version 4, if, for instance, version 5 was released, those new changes captured within version 5 may not be compatible with your own firm template. So you might want to create a brand new file using version 5, not your old template, and then you would copy this work paper if it was the same in version 4 and 5 from the prior year's audit file. But I'll come to that problem you may encounter when we talk about firm templates and rolling forward. B5, materiality. Not a lot is required from the auditor on this work paper. You'll see the numbers in these fields are captured automatically when we import the financial information. All we really need to do is choose the appropriate benchmark against which we're going to compare materiality. So for instance, total income or total assets, wherever we are, total liabilities, total assets, etc. That's really the only requirements that you may have on this work paper. You might want to change this performance materiality or the overall materiality figures, but apart from that, there's no real work required from you when completing this work paper. You might want to consider the written text down here. Materiality for financial reporting purposes is addressed in the top half of this work paper. If we go down to where we were a second ago, the compliance materiality, this information is taken from the ATO document, How to Complete the Auditor Actuary Contravention Report. So it's really a guidance work paper more so than a work paper which requires you to perform a lot of work when completing. If I move on to work paper B6, the analytical procedures, this is another procedure or work paper rather designed to identify risks. So risk may exist based on the materiality of the financial statement item. It might exist based on the variance between last year and current year. It might exist for a number of other reasons. You'll see that the materiality, this response is a default response. based on this information up here, which is captured in the prior work paper we just looked at. You also have the ability to change the assessment, the automatic assessment of materiality in this comment, or this column rather, that I'm showing you now. If you want to increase the screen size so that you can see all of this in one screen, top or towards the top left of this work paper, you can see that full screen button. By clicking on that, the work paper can be enlarged, allowing you to get a better view of this work paper. To go back or revert back to our original screen, top left corner, the full screen, and we're back to where we started from. Again, there's not a lot of work required on this work paper. If we identify any risks when performing the analytical procedures, we would simply comment on the risk here. You would just comment there. This is just, a lot of these procedures are there because the auditing standards require us to consider such risks, such indicators, etc. Apart from that, not a lot of work required potentially from the auditor when completing B6. I'm going to jump over work paper B7 for now and come back to that in a minute. I want to show you work paper B8, which is probably or potentially is the most comprehensive work paper within the software, and that's the trust deed review work paper. You'll see 45 procedures up there we're required to consider and complete. This is one of those work papers when we're completing our firm template or creating our firm template, we might want to create default responses. And I'll show you that later. When we're completing this for the first time, this work paper, just a few tips that might be useful in saving a bit of time is don't potentially consider what is appropriate or applicable to the fund. So for instance, what I mean by that is if we've got a fund with a 40-year-old couple. Let's go down the page. Let's say firstly, we've got a fund with a 75-year-old couple. They're not working and they're not making any contributions. I'd suggest you consider if they're not making contributions, how relevant some of these procedures may be here. Likewise, if they're a 40-year-old couple and they're not making member benefit payments, I wonder how applicable some of these questions might be. They may not be using reserves, so I wonder how applicable some of these questions might be, etc. If you've completed this and the second year comes around, firstly, these responses will be carried forward from the prior year. So another way to save time here is if you look up at the top of this page, is this a second year onwards audit for the firm? If I tick yes, this is a second year audit onwards for the firm, this question appears asking us whether the rolled forward responses from last year are really the same or have they been, or any changes in the deed been captured. If I tick yes, no changes to the governing rules have occurred during the year, well then I potentially don't need to go any further. Where am I? So that's really the work, that's really the risk assessment procedures. If I go back to B7, the risk identification procedures, if I go to B7 now, the risk assessment work paper, you'll be prompted with this screen. I personally prefer the full lead schedules, not the lead schedule summary, because it just allows you to identify risk at specific, it just provides us a more comprehensive lead schedule for identifying or assessing risks. It's hard to explain, but I'd like to choose that lead schedule as opposed to the lead schedule summary. We've got a bit of a couple or a few paragraphs about internal control risk. We've got the top half of this document is designed to identify risks to the financial report, collectibles, property, managed investments, etc. The financial figures flow through automatically when we upload the financial information. The comment on material, that is automatically generated based on the materiality work paper B5. And the risks, this column here is where we identify any risks. We've got two choices here. We can look for the risk in the risk library, blank risk, the risk library. You can choose risks, for instance, bank. Where are we got another one? Investments, for instance. Oops, wrong one. What I was going to, collectibles. Let's ignore that. Let me go and ignore that. Direct property. So one of the risks with direct property, let me go back, that's the lead schedule. One of the risks with direct property, it might be a property situated in New South Wales, individual trustees, and the title search when I perform a title, sorry, I've just clicked on the lead schedule again, let me go back. The owner of the property, when I do a title search, says it's Ma and Pa, not Ma and Pa as trustee for the super fund. So the risk is from the risk library. There's an example of a risk. Investment not beneficially owned by the fund. If I again can't see the full text, where are we? Full screen, if I click on this full screen button, so the risk is the investment is not beneficially owned. Use the spelling. The further audit procedure might be for instance. Or we can add our own risk from the library. So we go to direct property. I'll talk about that when we get to the compliance. We have the ability to add our own risk. For instance, the risk might be property values the same this year as last year, but I know Sydney house prices on average have gone up by 16%. You would then, because we've created our own blank risk, unlike when we identify a risk in the risk library. When we identify a risk in the risk library, we also, that risk has attached to it a sample further audit procedure. It also gives us the assertions that might be at risk. When we create a blank risk, such as what I just did then, we have to create our own assertions. So valuation. We also have to create our own further audit procedures. For instance, when we come down the page, they're the financial statement risks. If I go down the page, there we go, we come to compliance risks. So let me, I know why we're going, I've got to escape the full screen mode. So back to the top left corner, full screen mode, escape that. If I go down the page, you'll see I come to my compliance risks. We can add a risk from the library, and we can choose from any of these template or sample risks rather, or I can create my own risk again. So for instance, add the blank risk. The risk might be risk of material misstatement, high, medium, low, reference, and what are we going to do about it? Obtain to confirm that the tenant is not a related party tenant. Now that would be for a residential property. So we can, again, just to summarise, we can create a risk from the library, or select a risk rather from the library, or we can create our own blank risk. Then finally on this page, or one of the final steps on this page, is to provide our overall risk assessment from the options here. Now what's the idea is if I've selected this as, there's no direct linkage. So if I choose high at this stage, there's no correlation. If I select high, will that then go and flow on and generate or be reflected in the audit program? We have to do that ourselves. We have to use our own professional judgment and our own procedures to ensure that the correlation between this risk and between any of these risks, and between any of these risks that we've identified here are appropriately addressed. So for instance, that compliance risk, if I've indicated that that is what my audit procedure is in response to the risk, I need to make sure that when I'm completing my further audit programs that I actually implement those procedures. And then finally, you can change this, you can keep it, you can edit it, you can do whatever you want to this text in these boxes. But this information is there as a guide to what we think would be a suitable response based on many different situations. So really that's our planning and risk assessment work papers. Do you have any questions there, anyone? Let me just go and look on the control panel, if that's what it's called. Anyone have any questions about what I've just covered? No, not from me. Thanks, Peter. Okay, so then once we've done or completed the B section, where are we? We go now to the work paper index. Let me just remove or hide that. Now it really comes time to completing our audit program. As I mentioned earlier, we need to, I think we actually created the program for this file, but let's go to the program. A2 is where, let's go back to the workflow diagram before we go any further. So you'll notice each time I complete these procedures, B1 down to B8, if I've ticked complete on the boxes on each of those work papers, such as I have here, the completed boxes will be ticked on this workflow diagram. If not, I can just tick them as or mark them as complete on this work paper, etc. Next, gathering audit evidence. If I go to the next task in the workflow diagram, gathering audit evidence, that's really when we start to also complete the audit program A2. So A2, we need to make sure, if we haven't already done so, we need to create the audit program. Now, remember we created this audit program during our last webinar. Just a reminder of how to do that. If we tick on the Customizer or click on the Customizer tab towards the top of our page, Customizer, we select the most appropriate response. The default response is no. If I need to change it, I need to click on yes. Property, etc. Close that and we've created our audit program. I mentioned now if we click on, here's our audit program, sorry, let me go up again. You'll see these tabs toward the top of the page, A2, A2.2, etc. That's our audit program. So if we click on the program for assets, A2.2, you'll see we've created an edit here. I don't know if you remember, but normally in the firm template module or the industry template module, the first two procedures relate to the need to obtain a bank confirmation, which do not appear here because we've deleted them. If we want to, again, if we've deleted these procedures within a previous template, or if I ever want to add them back, I can do that in one of two ways. Firstly, the easiest way is probably just to edit this work paper. So in the top left, I click on File, Edit Mode. I go and add another row. So add a row. So I add my row. I get out of this again by clicking on Edit Mode in the top left corner. You'll see that the procedure will appear down towards the bottom. Oh, where do we go? It didn't save for some reason. Either way, I won't go back and try that again. In reality, I'd go and repeat that step. I don't know why it didn't save there. It would appear down toward the bottom of the procedures, so I would just drag and drop it from the bottom back up to the top. Now to do that, I would have to go back into File, Edit Mode until the page was activated, or in Edit Mode it was activated, and I drag and drop it back up to the top. Another way that I can create, if I've deleted a lot of procedures from this work or any work paper, I can reset this template, this work paper. What I mean by that is if I click on, where are we? Reset form, so the File drop-down menu, File top left, Reset form, reset the work paper. You'll see in a second, that's where it is, I must have put it in the wrong spot. But what you'll see right now is this procedure or this work paper A2.2 has been reset to the industry template, and there's the procedure that would ordinarily appear on A2.2, along with the need to ensure that that procedure. See, previously, before I reset that page, that was procedure number 1 on A2.2. Now the downside of that is if you're going to do it that way, reset the page, you'd probably want to do it very early on in the process, because if I, for instance, have completed work paper A2.2, I've marked everything as complete, I've put in my commentary, I've added my documentation. When I go to reset that work paper, it does just that. It resets this work paper to scratch, meaning all that work that I've done is lost, and I'll have to recreate this work paper. So if you need to make changes to this program and add documentation or procedures back to the program, I should say, you'd want to do it through you're probably better off doing it through the edit mode and just adding any particular procedure to the line that is felt necessary. I'll come back to, I discussed it briefly earlier in the first webinar about how to provide commentary in here, etc. I'll come back and revisit that when we look at the firm template module as opposed to now. One of the steps that I showed you when filling out B1.1 earlier in this webinar was by ticking these completed boxes. I don't have the ability to do that. Remember in the first B1.1 I clicked prepared by, clicked on the date, and then the date. That doesn't work in this instance. See, there. The reason being there are 100, in this case 105. There could be even more than 105 depending on the assets or the financial statement items. These 105 procedures are all contained within A2, A2.2, 2.4, 2.5, etc. all the way through to A2.10, and for that reason, probably because there are so many procedures there that need to be ticked, the developers have probably not incorporated that tick here once and apply that tick to all function. Communicating directly, so I mean these procedures, I won't go into them, but if you look, these are pretty standard program procedures that you've probably seen in various different audit programs. I'll talk about the commentary again when we get to the firm template module. What happens though when we identify issues? So for instance, let me go, excuse me, to the contributions tab. Let's say for instance we're auditing contributions. and the member has made a member deducted contribution, but they haven't provided us with this document. Excuse me. So I need to ask for that from the client. So how to communicate directly? All I've done is that. So you'd take note of that document, and we want to follow that up with the trustee. I suppose the first thing to do would be ask yourself as a firm, do you want the particular auditor working on the file to communicate or request information directly from the trustees or the accountant, or would you rather just someone with certain authority to do that, such as manager or above, senior auditor or above? You just potentially don't want someone straight out of a graduate, or anyone for that matter really, asking the trustees or the accountant information that A, is either not necessary, or two, that you've already been provided and it's sitting somewhere else and that auditor was just not familiar with where it was stored. So one way to a safeguard for ensuring that doesn't happen would be, now this what I'm about to tell you now is really probably applicable when you've got two people working on the file. If you're an auditor who you are, what's the phrase go? The cook, the cleaner, the bottle washer and everything in there, you may just put all queries straight through to work paper A1, and that's the work paper we communicate directly with the accountant or administrator with. Or if you've got other staff working on the file, you would probably be better putting that query to work paper, one of the review point work papers. So for instance, we would just copy that query, go down to the bottom of each work paper, or we can go to the top. We're looking for the review points. We can find review points at the top right of the page. If we were to click on work paper index at the top left, and then go and find the review point folder, we would be able to add the review point in that way also. But I think the best way is to go to the bottom left of each work paper and click on this new review point tab. Select the review point page. In this case, we'll send it straight to the partner. Copy in our review point and assign that to the appropriate person, so in this case the partner. Now if you've put that to partner review points, the partner, because they're provided that partner is listed as a team member on this engagement, that will appear in the partner's review point folder when they log in. If I want a message to pop up to that partner, I need to assign it to the partner. Assign to the partner. If I don't assign it to anyone, again, it will appear in the partner's work papers. When they log in, they'll see, if they log into RP 1.2, they'll see this review point, but they won't get a notification on their dash page unless I allocate or assign that review point to that partner. So now, when you are the partner, you'll get notified in the activity feeds of this review point. You log in, you see the review point, and you think, yeah, we need to get that from the client. Or you might think, no, we've already got it. It's sitting over there in that file. Go and get it from there. If you want to chase this missing document up with the client, the partner then would have to reallocate this query to work paper A, because remember A1 is that's the funnel that communicates directly to the trustees or the administrator. Now to reallocate that, we would simply click, sorry, let me go back to it. Sorry, let me get out of this, I clicked the wrong one. The partner would log in, they would go to the review point. There's that review point there. They would click on the review point. Then if they click on this pencil, that makes this live. I click on the drop down arrow, administrator queries, okay. Now if I go to work paper A1, there we go. There's our query. All I've done then is transferred it from RP 1.2 to A1. Now, at the bottom of that page, when I click on this green button, a message will be sent to the administrator or the accountant or the trustee or whoever's email address you have in the client file, asking them for that document. Again, when they respond, they'll have a page which looks similar to this A1. They will upload that ATO document to this page and notify you by clicking on their green button that says Notify Auditor. You'll receive this page, and sitting here, underneath here, will be that ATO document with a button there that says Send it to a particular work paper. So that's the communication process where we can communicate queries and obtain or receive information straight through the audit flow software with the trustee or the client. Any questions? I'll just stop there for 30 seconds, give you a chance to jot down any questions, provide any comments, etc. that you may have. No one have any questions? There's another one. No, thanks Peter. No one else got any questions? All right. Okay, so now we've really finished our audit. You've got your auditor who's finished the audit, and it's time for the manager to review the file, or the partner to review the file before we generate the auditor's report. Some people have asked, how long does it take to review? Well, by the way, these boxes will all look like this when it comes time to review. That was the cheats way that I talked about earlier. We can mark them as all complete by just ticking on these boxes. All right, so anyway, we've got a file that looks pretty complete. Let me just go and do this. And so it's time for the auditor to review. Now, to answer the question, how long does it take to review? Well, that's not really, that's how long is a piece of string. Well, it depends on how much authority and faith you have in the person undertaking the audit. So, for instance, some people I know, the partner likes to do a very thorough review. Others I know, not to say the partner is any less vigilant, but I've got colleagues who do thousands and thousands of funds, and they've got 3 levels of engagement team. They've got the auditor undertaking the audit. They've got they've actually got 4 levels engagement. They've got a manager who performs, firstly, the manager undertakes the higher end procedures, and they also perform a thorough review. And then you've got a quality reviewer who reviews a sample of them. And so by the time it gets to the auditor, the partner, the registered auditor, they don't have to perform as thorough a review as some others may wish to undertake. I won't tell you how to review, it's just going through the process really and reviewing it in a manner that the partner or the manager sees fit. Now these are all blank here because I took the cheats option. So the partner would, or the manager would just be reviewing it in the same way as they would review a paper-based folder. So I really don't have an answer to that apart from to say you'd review a file in audit flow the same way as you'd review a file in a paper-based folder. Once you've finished the review, what would I show you now? I'll show you once you've finished the review and the partner can sign off. Then I'll come and show the workflow manager later. So once the partner's finished the review, and you've written all your auditors' reports, representation letters, etc. By the way, before I go any further, so where were we? New file. Once, let's just go to those letters again. So there we've got template management letters, a template representation letter. I'll just quickly click on that. Again, this information's captured in various fields within the software. You might want to copy and paste that onto a Word document and send it out to the trustees. Copy, paste onto a Word, save it as a PDF, and then upload it into A1 and send that straight to the trustee through, or the accountant through the software. Once all of those letters have been generated and provided to the trustees or the accountants, etc., the partner reviews it. So from the file, the drop-down menu, completion and archive, firstly you might want to print it. If I want to print it first or save a hard copy in PDF file, I save a PDF file I should say, you would export the entire audit file as a zip archive. That will save it all as one PDF document, as opposed to if I choose that print option, having to do every page individually. Once I've done that, if I tick the complete and archive option, you'll come to this page, and it is as simple as ticking this partner sign off. Now, you want to hope that the partner is the only person within the firm that has authority to do that. So once that's signed off, you've got two choices. The file has to be locked down so to prevent any modification post-audit. Now, we've got two options. We can tick sign off, and the software will automatically lock that down after 60 days. Sometimes when you choose sign off, now this was not a BGL one, so it won't work, but the message won't appear. If that was sometimes with BGL, if the accounts have not been mapped properly, when I click partner sign off audit file, a pink box like that one that I'm hovering over will appear. I think it's just above this partner sign off audit file that says not all of the accounts have been mapped correctly or mapped. Do you want to click here to go to the trial balance and map, or the lead schedule and map those accounts? You can go to the lead schedule, map them correctly, or otherwise put ignore or select ignore, we don't want to map them, and then come back and you'll be able to tick that partner sign off audit file box. Now we can either leave it to the software to lock this down automatically after 60 days. Alternatively, we can archive it now. If I click on this button now, archive now, that file's locked and I won't be able to make any more changes once I've ticked that. I think a lot of auditors like to let it not tick that and let the system do it automatically after 60 days, just in case they need to make any other changes. And really that's it. Any questions on what I've shown you just then? No? No, all right, excellent. Okay, the workflow manager. So let me just go back up to the home page. This page, firstly, let's go to the audit file. So that will now look complete. So this button up the top, status not set yet. If I click on that, you'll see a series or a number of different statuses. So for instance, when the information, you might have a team and one person within that team is responsible for corresponding with the accountant or the administrator. So the accountant, or you might have, for instance, if I'm just making roles here up, you might have the office manager who's responsible for, remember when I created this first query, I said, let's set the file up and then let's notify the accountant or the auditor or the accountant or the administrator or the trustee that the file's ready to go. Can you please provide us with all the information? So the accountant, administrator, trustee might upload all the supporting documentation in here and let the office manager know. So that might be a situation now that the office manager, once they receive that notification, selects, come back to the work paper index, status not set, and click this, choose one of the various statuses, ready for audit. So it might say something along the lines of, have received all the information, ready for audit. And there's a chain or a file, a chain of transactions there. So now that might send a message to the auditor. So the auditor opens up, starts doing the planning, the procedures, etc., finishes the audit, or not finishes the audit, and they might just tick off as soon as they start. They might tick, this just tracks where we're going with the audit. Then they get stuck with a query, so they click on the administrator query button. When they've finished the audit, it's ready for the manager or outstanding review points, whatever. It's ready for the partner. Click on that, choose the partner. When I click notify, the partner will now receive an email saying that we're finished, we're ready for you to review the audit. So now, at any point in time, so that's when we're actually in the audit file. At any point in time, any audit member or any staff within the firm can click on the dash, go to the dashboard, drop-down menu, Workflow Manager, and pull up a search or do a report based on those statuses or any in a number of these other filters here. So the one that they might want to do is by status. So if you're the partner and you want to do a search by how many files are ready for your review, you go and choose or find the all the files that are ready for your review and do a search. Shows we've got however many there. We've got a few, about 10 or so files ready for review. But you'll know some of these, I think from memory, are, oh no, they're all SMSFs. So here we go. These are all the SMSFs ready for partner review. Where was the one we just created? New client. That's the one we just created. So the partner then just clicks on that, opens up the file ready for review. Now when the partner's finished, remember, come back to this partner review status. The partner has reviewed, they've gone back, they've signed the auditor's report. Now the office manager sends that auditor's report and the representation letter, the management letter, whatever they need to send to the client, and they click that status. So that's the workflow. That's how the workflow manager works. If we look at that history, there's the history of the statuses or history of this file. Any questions with regard to that? Here we go, there's one there. Sorry, I missed how to get that. Sorry, there's only a very small window for me to read. Sorry, Gail, is it? Oh, sorry, Peter, sorry. Missed how to get that section, the workflow manager section, or the, do you have access to audio, Peter? Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now, yep.
Yeah, so I just missed how you got to that workflow manager section.
All right, so, okay, so the status, that's where this, when you're in an actual audit file, see this where it says deliverable sent to the client, that's where you create the status. If you want to then as a staff member go and do a report by status, you need to be on the dashboard. So on the dashboard, if we go down to dashboard and the workflow manager. So if you click on that, sorry, 2.6, and that's where we go to the workflow manager that I was showing you before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay. So now, if it comes time to, what are we going to do? I'll just, I'll come now and revisit the copy the work papers, and then we'll look at the creating the firm template again. We'll revisit creating the firm template. So for instance, let's just open up this file again, so that new client template. Let's say that, for instance, that work paper B8. I've started this file, it's a new file, and we go to work paper B8. You see, remember, this is one of the more onerous work papers. Firstly, let's untick completed. So we untick completed. We want to copy rather than having to fill this out and answer 45 questions. If we're satisfied that a lot of the responses across various different funds are the same, I can copy this work paper from another file. So if I go to my work paper index, copy work papers from another file, I think it was, I think it's one of these. So if I just pretend, I think that one's filled out. If I just find a particular fund, it doesn't have to be the same fund. If I choose a fund and I want to copy work paper B8. So over on the right of this screen is a list of all the files that, so let me say, a list of all the list of the work papers in any given file. So I go and choose the one I want. If I tick this top box, I'll be copying all work papers over. If I want to just copy over work paper B8, I've got to tick this. B8, trust deed and governing rules review work paper. Select the one that I want to copy over. If I go right down to the bottom of this page, and I've got 4 options, 2, 3, I want to override the existing work papers. Import, don't worry about these for now. Override existing. What that's going to do is that's going to override the work paper B8 in this file, the new client SMSF, with work paper B8 from this Peter Jones super fund. So I go down, I click import. Okay. Now if I go to the fund again, so now let's go to work paper B8 in this file. And if I go to the trust, where am I? With B8. Trust deed and governing rules review work paper. Now that one, okay. That's blank, not because it didn't work. That must be, there's 2 Peter Joneses. And I've chosen the wrong Peter Jones super fund. What will happen is if that file that I copied, if this has been completed, so that put egg on my face, but that's because that Peter Jones work paper B8 was empty. If that Peter Jones work paper B8 was completed, all of these boxes would have been ticked with the same responses that were in that file. Also, what it will do is if I go back to the work paper index, it creates a backup of that file. So if I look at my work paper index down the bottom, the backup file, the folder, you'll see this is the original new client. This is the original B8 from the client file. That's the one that I ticked to start with. So just in case I've made a mistake when I imported that new work paper, it creates a backup of the original work paper for me to use later if I need to. Any questions on that copy work papers function? Okay. And one of the last things really, or if not the last thing then, is just to show you how to create the firm template, so your own firm template module. Really the first page is the dash. So we start to create our firm template from the dash page, and we start by manage templates. So the dashboard drop-down menu, manage templates. Where are we? Choose over in the top right hand corner, we're going to create our own new template. This is our firm template we're going to create, top right corner, new template. We'll call it, we're going to give the name, the firm name. We're going to give the template a name. Choose the type of audit template, in this case SMSF, and create. So we've created the start XYZ firm template, the start of our new template. We actually, what we have to do is copy that. We've got to create, right now we've just named the template. We've actually got to create the or choose a template that we're going to modify. In other words, we go and choose a template to use as our starting point. Now in this place we choose the industry. We're better off choosing the industry template. If you've already got your own firm template, say you've got your own firm 2015 template, and come 2016 you want to copy that and just make a few changes, you would copy your 2015 template. If you're doing it for the first time, you're probably better off starting with the industry template, so SMSF version 4. So we find that template and we import all the, So that's our template. What we're doing, we're just finding that template, and there's the documents, there's the work paper folders that will be copied into our firm template, our own firm template to start the editing. If you're not if you don't have a habit generally of obtaining bank confirmations, this is the first point in editing. So you might just get rid of some of these. You might get rid of all of them, but either way, if I tick that top left box there, all of these will appear ticked, meaning all of those with a tick next to them will be copied forward into my firm template. If I don't want to obtain bank confirmations, I just don't tick that box. Now, if I go down to the bottom, just don't tick any of these, just import. What is going to be imported are each of these folders. There we go. So now if I just go to my work paper index, so we're still in draft mode by the way, there's all of my folders in my firm template. Now you won't be able to I mean you can. So one of the first steps, I was going to say you won't be able to create the program, well you sort of can here, but firstly I would go, really they're the two pages we're going to modify, A and B. If, oh sorry, I want to create a new one. I want to create a new folder. New folder. Create. So there's my new folder that I've created. I want to link, I can't, what I was trying to do is link those lead schedules to the documentation. So in the last webinar, under some of those lead schedules, I put in the work paper reference SD. I can't put those work paper references SD because I haven't yet created the lead schedules for them. So what I'll do is open up the audit program. I'll show you, the first thing that I'll show you just in the editing is creating, to edit the full program, we have to have a full program. So I need to go and tick yes to all of these. I have to create the full program. This is probably it might take an hour or two, maybe 3 hours to do, but you only do it once, and then going forward you don't need to do them. You might only have, if you don't want to modify all pages, you only choose those work papers you want to modify. So for instance, let's close this down. What I've gone and done by ticking all of those boxes as yes, I've created a complete program that I'm now going to go and make edits to. Remember, this is one of those procedures I was not going to obtain bank confirmation for all accounts. If I don't want to do that in my firm template, I edit that and remove that. Close it down. Oh, not yet. I might remember we made some commentary. We made some commentary, agree to closing balance. If you're in a habit, if you find yourself common or often putting commentary in here, you might want to do that here. Etc. So that's one edit you might wish to make. Let me just, with regard to the, let's go to B, let's just close this for a moment. Some of the other edits we talked about earlier were B section, the B section. The auditor independence. For instance, if you're a firm that operates under a Chinese walls arrangement, you might change this in your firm template. Along with the default safeguard. In B1, one of the work papers we were looking at earlier, B1, we have a pre-populated list of threats. If we go down the page, We might not generally believe, so this is what I was talking about earlier, we might, for instance, we might choose the most appropriate that applies in most cases and delete the rest. If we're talking about the threats to integrity, if we generally don't find any threats to integrity, blank threat, FP, fundamental principle. So yeah, that's where we would make our changes. Are there any other changes? I'll just open up this comment box. Are there any other changes that you might find yourself making on a regular basis there, Peter? So no other changes? What I mentioned, and I don't think it's going to work, but what I mentioned last week was putting in references into the lead schedules, into the audit program, whether or not there's any information stored there already. And then when we actually go and create that, when we go and upload that information, then that reference becomes live. Now I was just looking at it then when I was making those changes to the A section, and I don't think it's going to allow us to put in a reference in the edit stage. Let me just double check for a second. So if I want to create a reference in here, yeah, so it looks like it will have all bank statements for the current year, obtain them all, and agree to the closing balance. Remember, I always anyway, reference them to the bank statements. So everything here I will put to F, review bank reconciliation if I get one. For all bank accounts will be held at F2 or SD1, SD, supporting documentation, and all linkage to the bank accounts is done through the lead schedule F21. So you might, when I then go and save that, so when I save this template, so my firm template has been saved, even though that F21 is not a live hyperlink, as soon as I go and create a lead schedule with F in it, that will become a live link. And then when I open up F, the lead schedule will, and I put in SD, or if I put in SD1, SD2, etc., any work paper that gets stored in the supporting documents folder will automatically be linked to the lead schedule, and this program automatically links this procedure to the lead schedule. So that's probably some of the changes. That's why I've probably off the top of my head covered most of the changes that I think might be come in handy. Are there any others that you're aware of, or any other functions that you want to know if we can perform when creating the firm template?
I'm just going to come offline because we seem to be, I can't type quick enough,
Okay,
Ashley. Yeah. I think, I mean, what I'm taking from this, the vast majority of the audit program and the planning section can be pre-populated, because we're essentially auditing just SMSF, and I can only think of really two scenarios that I would want to run, and that's just really different referencing scenarios. One where we had one document come in, and one where we've got quite a number of different documents come in.
Yep.
But from what I'm taking from this, if I go back and ensure that I go through a common referencing system and probably do a bit more work around the planning section, in particular around the risks and whatnot, I think they're the main areas that we can probably improve our existing template.
Yep.
I guess I'd taken the initial view, rightly or wrongly, that I'm just calling up a file now. the risk assessment section.
Sorry, Peter. Sorry, before you go any further, Peter. Sorry, before you go any further.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go to the risk assessment, or is this? Well, I'm just trying to work out: is it a firm template question or a risk assessment? Because if it's not a firm template, I'll go to the risk assessment and get out of this page. So sorry for that.
No, look, it's really about the risk assessment, but it's not necessarily we have to look at anything. I mean, in your experience, is that being widely used and completed for SMSF? At the moment, I'd taken the view, because it wasn't integrated with the audit program, that I was using the audit program to be pretty much the area where I was making sure that I was covering the risks.
Yeah. As you say, it's not integrated. Is it covered? I think a lot depends who you're speaking to. Some people out there, I've had some people come to me and say, the risk assessment wasn't done properly. The QA reviewers will say, oh, you haven't assessed risk properly. That's because a lot of times the fund doesn't. There's two reasons generally for that. One might be because the client hasn't assessed risk, and the other reason is that there were no risks to assess. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to, as the name says, assess risk. If there are no risks, that's why I'm saying, suggest you say, we've considered this and there are no risks. A long answer to your question is, are people using this extensively? I don't think they are, but I think they get concerned or they get overwhelmed by looking at it thinking, gee, I've got to do it. You have to assess risk. But what I'm trying to say is people may or may not be doing it. If you don't do it when there were risks involved, you could find yourself answering to the QA reviewers or the regulators, why didn't you assess risk? If you've assessed risk or identified risk and there were just none to identify, at least you need to document that on this page. So I'm not sure if it's a great answer to your question.
I think you've answered it. Not a lot of people are using this functionality at this point in time. They're probably documenting their risks elsewhere, and that's, I would consider that's probably what we're doing. Is it is documented. It's just not necessarily in that section.
Yeah. I don't know whether they are or not. I just know those ones that come to me and say we were pulled for not doing it.
Right.
Yep.
All right, guys. Has anyone else got any other questions? I'm just asking, has anyone else got any other questions before we've hit 4:30? We need to wrap up. It's a no from Rocky.
Okay.
I haven't heard from Matt for a while. He might have gone somewhere.
All right, no worries then. All right.
All right.
Just remember in the top right, you've got that helpline if you do get stuck, as well as the contact details. But thanks for your time, Peter. Thanks everyone else for your time. Hope that all goes well, and you've got our details if you have any queries.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.